They called the meeting at the parish hall. I knew before I was summoned that it would be bad, but I tried to hold my back straight, to keep my hands from trembling as I walked through the sun-washed piazza. The church loomed, a cold crust of history layered with piety, and the community hall beside it, its yellowed walls glowing faintly in the Roman morning. I heard the bell clack inside, a sharp note. Mama stood at the curb, arms crossed. She said nothing when I appeared, eyes hard, mouth pressed into a grim slash. The air trembled with the heat, even though it was only April. Heat always arrived early in my part of Rome, a kind that felt like it carried secrets. Inside, the wooden floor creaked beneath my footsteps. The walls were lined with cheap icons of saints, 8 rows of folding chairs mostly filled, some familiar faces, others less so, neighbors, school teachers, friends of relatives who had always spoken behind hands. A knot of children in the back near the window. I felt all their eyes seek me not as a person but as a point of embarrassment. Don Antonelli, the parish priest, stood in front, hands clasped over his belly. His robes looked grayer than usual, sweat darkening the collar. My father, stoic as ever, sat beside my brother Marco in the front row. Even Marco wouldn't meet my gaze. My sister Lucia kept her chin firm, but her gaze burned with a strange ache. When I sat, knees nearly buckling, the room hushed. Only the buzz of a single fly filled the silence. Don Antonelli cleared his throat, heavy, deliberate. Grazie a tutti, he began, staring at his folded hands, for coming today. We must talk about purpose, about work, and the path God has for all of us. He glanced at me, I stared at the cracks in the floor. Some of us, he continued, voice tightening, have taken ideas from the outside, from television, from foreigners, books written in another language. We begin to imagine great things, machines that think, medicine that changes the very fabric of God's creation. Some dreams, figli miei, are too big for the world in which God put us. A ripple of agreement, someone coughed, a sharp, disapproving sound. He went on, painting my life in accusations soft as velvet and sharp as knives. He said I disrespected my family, that I turned away from honest work for fantasy and blasphemy, chasing wealth, chasing dreams of laboratories and American research. He said science was good, but only as far as God willed. That men who forgot that became like Babel's builders, a warning woven with parable and sneer. I sat in the silence that followed, my palms sweated, my chest ached, a laugh threatened at my throat, something bitter twisted. Instead, I clenched my fists and dared to look up, faces that should have been proud of me disgusted, people I thought I loved folding their hearts away. I opened my mouth to answer, but Mama's sigh silenced me. I bit back the urge to protest, to ask how a love of learning could be unholy, how curiosity could betray God. My mind flooded with memories, crouched over borrowed books, blue glow of an old laptop, pages of notes scrawled by roadside lamplight, the bubbling promise of possibility. None of it mattered now. I saw that in the way their bodies leaned away from me, in their whispers. I was lost to them, gone for loving what they could not understand. The blessing came too late. The meeting ended with a dull, brief prayer. I slipped from the hall and walked home through the narrow streets, trailing resolve like a knife. What followed was silence. For months my family barely spoke to me. Marco avoided me, even Lucia grew cool. My father asked if I'd ever considered work, real work, at his construction site. I busied myself packing the last of my books, wrapping a beaker I'd saved from university. Later, as spring baked Rome into brick and dust, the job offer arrived, a position as a junior researcher at a biotech startup outside the city. It was not America or Switzerland or even the university's gleaming labs, but it was something. My professor wrote a single short reference: "You have an unusual mind, you work in silence and bring light." I clung to that line the first morning I bicycled to the industrial quarter, passing concrete walls dotted with coarse graffiti, inhaling the chemical tang that clung to cheap perfume and the bus exhaust. The laboratory was nothing like the places I'd seen in brochures. Its floors were chipped linoleum. The machines whined with age, hissing and rattling with every run. At night, the ghost of the city seeped through double-glazed windows, echoing in the distant growl of motorbikes. I shared a space with a group of 3 other researchers, a sullen woman named Georgia, Ernesto who had burned out by 30, and Salvatore who always had cold hands. My first project was tedious. Data collection for gene editing trials in tomatoes, a far cry from the elegant theories and bold ideas I'd written about in my notebook, but something to begin with. I moved through my days in a hush, methodical and dogged, cataloguing every anomaly, checking protocols none of the others had patience for. Little by little, my silence became a shield. I buried my shame in numbers, in pipettes and code and scanned images of gel blots. I called home every week. Sometimes Mama answered, sometimes she let it ring. One evening, months later, I found myself alone in the lab, staring at an error message blinking in angry red. The code for the AI model we were building had failed again. For the 10th time, for the 100th, always the same issue: data irregularities, impossible to parse with their backward, sluggish software. It was midnight. Through the pane, I could see the bone-white line of the Tiber in the distance, snaking between the dim buildings. I sat back, rubbing my scalp until I felt the sting. A voice in my head whispered, "Give up." Like they said, "This is nonsense. You are nothing but a child dreaming at a desk while the world moves on." But anger rushed up hot and pure, and I stood. I poured myself a coffee, harsh, sour, burnt, and opened an old notebook. I tore through the errors line by line, rewriting half the functions, discarding old training data, feeding in new batches, testing, breaking, rewriting until dawn bled pale over the skyline and pigeons thumped onto the ledge outside. In the silence, something shifted. The code ran true. I grinned, an absurd, childish grin. Then I ran a second test, then a third, still flawless. I left it running, heart banging out of my chest, and watched the results tallied by the hour. That model, crude as it was, tripled the lab's efficiency by month's end. Georgia grunted approval one morning as she thawed a culture, her version of a standing ovation. Soon, the work came faster. We published a paper, my name third on the list, but it was there. We landed a modest grant, then another, and then the real breakthrough, a multi-institution project on sequencing gene therapies for rare inflammatory diseases. Suddenly my models mattered. My papers were cited once, then dozens of times. My former professor sent a terse congratulations. The world widened. I was courted by a research institute in Zurich, a startup in Barcelona, a program in Boston. I took meetings in glass towers, entered and left laboratories where the light was always clean and white, not yellowed or dusty. Strangers wanted my ideas. For the first time, I was not the oddity, but the person others listened for at conferences, in small polished gatherings after work. I learned to speak generously but answered criticism with a smile. I was too grateful to fight. Years passed. My Italian grew stiff and formal, tinged with northern vowels now, but I never lost the snarl of my old city when I was tired. My name appeared on more papers. Finally, a company, a real company built with colleagues from 3 countries, offered me a partnership. Our project, a unique blend of AI protein simulation and targeted molecular therapy, won a European Innovation Grant. €5 million and a seat at the World Summit in Berlin. The announcement brought a swarm of journalists and glossy write-ups. I gave interviews nervously, sweating in rented suits but forcing myself through. But always at the end I thought of Rome, of that church hall, of the people who had called me naive, delusional, presumptuous, almost profane. Nights before a new launch, as I reviewed my slides or fretted over a paragraph, I saw again the yellowed walls of that hall. I saw my family's faces, the disappointment, the fear disguised as righteousness. One evening, 3 years and 7 months after I had left, I received an invitation by post. It was Lucia's wedding. A mass at the church, then a reception at a restaurant notorious for its view of the city at sunset. Mama's handwriting at the bottom, "Please come, your sister asks especially." I bought a ticket, holding the receipt with fingers gone white at the knuckle. When the taxi rolled into my neighborhood, the air was thick with the smell of fried bread, blooming wisteria, the sharp undertone of gasoline. I stared at the familiar graffiti, the battered doors, the scatter of children lingering everywhere in the early evening. Nothing had changed except me. Mama met me at the door, older, softer, a hint of awe in her silence. She hugged me fiercely, then coughed and backed away, muttering about needing to check on the wedding cake. Lucia greeted me with shining eyes, barely grown but firm in a white dress. Father even clapped me on the back, muttering, "Good to see you, ragazzo." At the church, the mass unfurled, golden and slow, incense wound through the arches. I sat in the same row as before. Marco, rounder now and balding, glanced occasionally at the medal pinned on my suit jacket, our company's mark, a badge of technical achievement just beneath the lapel. At the reception, surrounded by more faces I both knew and had forgotten, the air detonated with laughter, clinks of glass, Lucia radiant in the center. I slid along the wall, awkward as ever. A knot of old neighbors huddled beside the buffet, Signora Allori, her son Pietro, 2 teachers and Don Antonelli, older but no less self-assured. I moved for the garden. A rectangle of chipped flagstones overlooked the edge of the city. The sun dropped, starting to fire the rooftops gold. Below, the sprawl of Rome curled in ochre and shadow. Pietro followed. He was bigger than I remembered, heavyset, with a thick beard and an old leather jacket. "You look different," he said, voice oddly gentle. "Work keeps me tired," I said. "You?" He shrugged, still at the ristorante. "Uncle's place," he hesitated. "Have you seen the news this week?" "No, work has been busy." "Don Antonelli, he said you were on television." He studied my face. "That grant, the big project for the medicine, was it you?" I nodded. "Me and my team, but yes." He looked down, running a hand along his jaw. "Some of them, they wanted to bring it up, but well, you know." He laughed, not unkindly. I felt something uncoil inside me. I exhaled, slow and careful. Inside, as the first course ended, Lucia clapped her hands, dragging napkins and silverware to gain attention. "Un momento per favor," she called, eyes on me. "Since my brother is finally back, I want to show you all something." A waiter rolled in a large flat screen, glossy as oil. Lucia fiddled with a remote. On the screen, a short video played, an interview in English, me awkward and stammering, explaining how our AI-mapped therapies had eliminated chronic inflammation in children with Savino's syndrome. Footage followed, a small girl giggling as doctors checked her vitals, another sequence showing our algorithm's predictions mapped in neon blue and green over tangled proteins. Headlines in 7 different languages flickered past. Italian researchers' model saves dozens of children, and Rome's own AI revolution from local lab. Room quieted, chairs scraped, then stilled. The video ended on my face, shaky, smiling, hair wild. Don Antonelli stood in the back, lips pursed. My father ran a thumb roughly over his jaw as if weighing the meaning. "I thought you should all see it," Lucia said softly. "He leaves because he's stubborn, because he's full of impossible ideas. But now, look." No applause, not at first, instead silence thick as marble. For a second I feared I'd be swallowed by it, then Mama moved, slow, steady. She came to me, taking my hand in both of hers, squeezing until my knuckles hurt. Tears gleamed, not quite fallen. "It was not a mistake," she said, voice caught between pride and apology. People crowded. Fathers pushed their children forward. "You see, this is Enrico, the boy from Via Tronto, the one they called Pazzo." Signora Allori sniffed, eyes shining. Even Marco hugged me, quick and stiff, but true. Pietro clapped me on the shoulder, beaming helplessly. Don Antonelli cleared his throat, cheeks red. "Congratulations," he whispered, hoarse rare. I stood among them, chest tight, hearing every sound. The wind shaking leaves free of dust, the rattle of cutlery, the low hum of distant traffic. Their hands on my shoulders, their laughter, the slow, unwinding years of doubt turning at last. That night, as the reception faded and the city's lights threw wild reflections on the Tiber, I walked back through the streets of my childhood. My shoes clicked on cobblestone, trees whistled, the air soft as linen. Rome opened before me, a place of old stones, old shame, and finally forgiveness. Above the rooftops, bells chimed out a new hour. I had come home at last. And in the silence, I was whole.